The mansion stood tall on the hill, its windows glistening under the morning sun like diamonds scattered across a velvet sky. But inside its golden walls, silence had reigned for 12 long years. Silence, not of peace, but of absence, an absence that tore at the heart of its owner every single day. Victor Harrison, a self-made millionaire, had everything a man could dream of. He owned businesses across the country, his name was printed in magazines, and luxury cars filled his garage. Yet all his riches meant nothing when he looked at his daughter Isabella, sitting quietly by the grand piano, her lips sealed as they had been since the day she was born. Isabella had never spoken a single word. Not a laugh, not a cry that formed into sound, not even the simple whisper of "Papa." Doctors called it a rare case. Some said it was psychological, others insisted it was a neurological condition. Victor had taken her to the world's best specialists, flown her across continents in search of a cure, spent millions. Yet every diagnosis ended with the same painful words: "She may never speak." And so Isabella grew, a beautiful child with eyes as deep as the ocean but always locked in a world of silence. She communicated through gestures, through drawings, and through the music she sometimes tapped on the piano keys. But her voice, her true voice, was trapped inside her. For Victor, every day was a reminder that money could not buy the one thing he wanted most: his daughter's voice. On the other side of town, far from glittering chandeliers and marble staircases, Daniel worked the streets as a garbage collector. His life was nothing glamorous. Every morning before dawn, he would put on his worn boots, climb onto the back of the rattling garbage truck, and ride into neighborhoods where people hardly even noticed him. To the world, he was invisible, just another man in a fluorescent vest, hauling away what others threw out. But Daniel was different from most who lived his life. He carried with him not just bags of trash, but stories he shared with anyone who cared to listen. He had grown up with very little, losing his parents young and raising his siblings on his own. Hardship had carved lines into his face, but it had also carved something else into his heart: compassion. Daniel had a way of speaking to people that made them feel seen, no matter who they were. Fate brought these two worlds together one quiet morning. The Harrison mansion was on the garbage route. Isabella would often sit by the front window, watching the garbage truck roll in. She was fascinated by the men who sang, laughed, and joked as they worked. Among them, Daniel stood out. He had a warmth about him, an ease that seemed to light up even the dullest streets. Unlike the others, he would sometimes glance up at the window and wave. At first, Isabella only tilted her head in curiosity, but after weeks, she began to wait for him. One day, while emptying the bins outside, Daniel noticed a sketchbook left by the gate. He picked it up gently, curious, and saw a drawing of a garbage truck with a man smiling and waving him. Shocked, he looked up to see Isabella peeking through the curtains. He raised the sketchbook, smiling wide, and mouthed a thank you. Isabella's cheeks flushed pink, and for the first time in a long while, a spark of happiness flickered in her eyes. From that day, Daniel made it a point to interact with her, even from afar. He would wave dramatically, point to the sky when birds flew overhead, or mimic silly faces. Slowly, Isabella responded with shy waves, giggles, silent but visible, and drawings left by the gate. Victor noticed the change. His daughter, who had often been distant and withdrawn, now rushed to the window every morning, clutching her sketchbook. At first, he was unsettled. Who was this garbage man capturing his daughter's attention? But when he saw her smile, really smile, something she hadn't done in years, he couldn't bring himself to stop it. Weeks passed and their silent friendship deepened. One rainy morning, the truck was delayed. Isabella waited by the window, her heart sinking. Hours passed and she sat at the piano tapping slow, sad notes. Finally, when the truck pulled in, Daniel jumped down, soaked but smiling. He noticed her at the window, lifted his hands, and pretended to be shivering. Isabella giggled silently, then disappeared for a moment. When she returned, she held up a thermos through the window. She wanted him to have something warm. Victor, watching from the hallway, felt a lump in his throat. This man, this stranger who collected garbage, had done something none of the world's best doctors or therapists had achieved. He had reached his daughter's heart. The turning point came on an afternoon that would forever change their lives. Isabella had been sitting in the garden drawing when Daniel walked by on his break. Victor had, after much hesitation, allowed him to greet her properly. Daniel knelt down, speaking softly, telling her about his little sister who, like Isabella, hadn't spoken until she was much older. "She used to draw just like you," he said gently. "One day she found the courage to say her first word. And do you know what? She never stopped after that. I believe you have a voice too. It's in there, waiting. Don't be afraid to let the world hear it." Isabella stared at him, her eyes wide. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not as a patient, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a person. She picked up her pencil and wrote on the paper, "What if they don't like my voice?" Daniel smiled, a warmth that melted every wall she had built around herself. "Then they don't deserve to hear it," he said, "because your voice is yours and it's already perfect." Something broke inside her then, not in pain but in release. For years she had carried fear, the invisible weight of expectation. But Daniel's words felt like keys unlocking a door. That night she sat by the piano, Victor by her side as always. She pressed the keys softly, then stopped, her hands trembling. And then it happened. A sound, fragile and trembling, broke the silence that had filled the house for 12 years. "Papa." Victor froze. His heart stopped, then raced as tears filled his eyes. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice shaking. She looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks, and repeated louder this time, "Papa." Victor pulled her into his arms, sobbing like he hadn't since her mother had died. The mansion, once silent, was now filled with the most beautiful sound he had ever heard, his daughter's voice. News spread quickly in their circle, but Victor didn't care what the world thought. What mattered was that his daughter had found her voice, and it was Daniel, the garbage man, who had given her the courage to speak. The next morning, when the garbage truck pulled up, Isabella ran outside barefoot, something she had never dared before. Daniel looked at her in surprise, then in awe as she opened her mouth and said, clear as day, "Thank you." For Daniel, it was as though the entire world had stopped. The girl who had been silent her whole life had spoken, and her first words to him were gratitude. He felt his own eyes fill with tears as he knelt down and said softly, "You did it. I told you your voice was perfect." From that day forward, Isabella spoke more and more, her confidence growing with each word. She laughed, she sang, she told stories of her drawings. Victor watched in wonder, realizing that the man society overlooked, the man who handled the world's waste, had given his daughter the one gift all his money could not buy. But the story didn't end there. Victor, deeply moved, offered Daniel a position within his household staff, but Daniel humbly refused. "I'm not here for a job, sir. I'm just glad I could help. Besides, people like me, we keep the world turning in our own way." Victor insisted, though not with money. Instead, he offered to fund Daniel's dream. For years, Daniel had wanted to start a community center for underprivileged children, a place where they could learn art, music, and storytelling, and be seen for more than their struggles. With Victor's support, that dream became a reality. Isabella, now with her newfound voice, became the heart of the center. She told children her story, encouraging them never to be afraid of who they were. Her soft, once silent voice became a beacon of hope. And every morning, no matter how busy life became, Isabella still waited by the window, not for a garbage truck but for a friend, a man who had once been invisible to the world but had done the unbelievable. The man who taught her that sometimes the most powerful voices are awakened not by wealth or status, but by kindness, faith, and the courage to see the unseen. In the end, the mansion on the hill was no longer silent. Laughter filled its halls, songs echoed from its piano, and the bond between a millionaire's daughter and a garbage man became a story that reminded everyone who heard it. True miracles don't come from riches. They come from love, compassion, and the belief that even the quietest souls have something worth saying.